And welcome to another episode of 50 Shades in Grey. With me today is the beautifully gorgeous Natalie Russel. Hello, darling. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. You? I don't know
I'm
why I did a really posh voice back then. Don't know.
For this time in the morning, you look really good. If you wake up like that, I'm on my way over to you very shortly.
Yeah, I just woke up like this. Absolutely.
That's what I want to hear. That's what I want to hear. So we're going to talk today, myself and Natalie, obviously about the show that we both on, My Mum, Your Dad, in the first season, and the second season is shortly to come out. But both myself and Natalie on the show, we met other people that we started a relationship. So we're not going to go into the ins and outs of relationships so much, but what we are going to talk about is why we both think it was something that we were both very invested in the show. Then when you come out of the show, doesn't work for either person. So this is not a mudslinging exercise. Maybe a little bit. No, I'm joking. It's not, but it's just to talk about how, because everyone said, "Oh, it was, what was it all real and was it not real?" So, Nat, what's your perspective on that?
I think my perspective is I'm someone, my highest value is having integrity. So I wouldn't ever pretend or fake anything, any connection. If I don't feel a connection, you'd be able to see it all over my face, because I also am so crap at lying or faking things. It's unreal. So, for me, that it was a completely real connection. I didn't expect it. You go in there hoping, don't you? For me, I've been on my own for 7 years. I think it's 7 years. I always get very confused. But I've been on my own a long time. So I definitely had a real strong desire to meet someone to, do life with. So when I first got in there, I did look around and I was like, is there anyone who's completely for me? That was the first thing. But I'm massive on going off character and connection. And when you first start speaking to someone, you can tell if you click and whether there's an attraction. So, yeah, for me, absolutely, it was a connection that I really, really I felt excited about. I think you can see on my face on the last day when we were doing with the kids, when we met up with the kids, just even when I watched it back, I cried, because I even though I knew the end of the story that it had all gone to pot, I sat there and I was so invested in my story with him myself, that I was crying, like thinking, yay! And then I caught myself and I was like, the story doesn't work out now.
You know the ending.
And then I cried some more.
I mean, I was really surprised, because I spent a lot of time with yourself and Paul in there. I think the three of us were together quite a lot. So I was, out of everyone, I thought you two, when we was in there, you two guys had the strongest connection. And I think a lot of people felt the same way as me that I spoke to after, but that were really surprised by it.
Yeah.
I think with Sharon and myself, I don't think people were so surprised, to be honest, that it didn't work. But what I've tried to explain to people is that I found it very much like a holiday romance, and not in terms not in terms of the casualness of it, in any detrimental way, but in the way that when you're in there, like literally there's no other aspects of your life that are around you that have an effect on you. So it's quite easy.
Right.
And like you, I'll be honest, when I walked in, I didn't ever expect to meet anyone anyway. Not that I didn't go on there for that. You have that in the back of your mind. But I went on there, I've said many times, because I was at a point in my life where I just wanted to do something. I didn't know what. I just wanted to do something different. And my initial thoughts when I went in there, that I wasn't actually attracted to anyone. It was only after spending time in there that I was then attracted to people, because you get to know them. And I think that's quite interesting. Because it's a bit like a work situation, that when you're actually at work, you get to know people and see them in a different light that you may not see in the beginning, you know. So that was
Yeah.
really interesting to me. But I do think the whole thing does bring up some really interesting sort of comments from other people as well.
Yeah. In terms of,
Just in terms of, you know, that a lot of people question whether a lot of it was real. You know, was we doing
yeah,
it for the cameras, and I've explained a
yeah,
few times that, you know, everything that I portrayed in there, I actually felt that way at the time, but when you come out, it's like 2 weeks later, you can feel completely different, and that's quite
hmm
unnerving, actually,
yeah,
for your inward self, thinking like, how have I changed so much so quickly? That bit for me
hmm
was a real insight.
well, I think you come back out into reality, right? Um, I think that I said it on the last program. I said, but this isn't real life, because I was so fully aware of real life. But when Paul and I came out, our connection and how it was, that really didn't shift and change. And I actually had a lot of people. I think people saw the connection because I had hundreds of messages going, I can't believe about you and Paul. I was convinced you two were, because it was a really genuine connection, and that did continue quite well. It was just when we hit bumps in the road and how that was navigated, that effectively led to kind of the decision being made that it wasn't going to be great for both of us long term, because we have different styles of dealing with things, different communication styles, and those long term can create some real conflict. And I think you get to a point in your life where I'm too,
Yeah,
I'm too old for this. I think relationships need to be something that you're always going to have challenges, but at least how you navigate those conflicts is really, really important, and whether your values align is really important. But yeah, I think there is always a perception of people going in on that show. Are they going in with genuine motives? Because it's TV, right? So
yeah,
there's always going to be, and I think there's going to be a mix of reasons why people go in. If someone says, absolutely, I'm going in because I want a relationship and there's absolutely nothing else behind it, either they haven't really delved into themselves enough to realize. But I think there's very few that go on there just because they are trying to become famous or whatever. I
I,
think
I think that
to
might
put
change down.
yourself,
That I think that might change down on that. I think when we did it, none of us had any idea of what it was. You know,
no.
and being truthful, we didn't even have any idea that it may be aired, because if it wasn't any good, they wouldn't have bothered with it anyway. They would have just sacked it off. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that would have changed now after the first show, because I think people going in
Yeah, possibly.
will know. I don't think, and for me, it wasn't that I didn't not want to meet someone, but I kind of thought, you know, if I haven't been able to do that on my own for the last 5 or 6 years, then the chances of a TV company being able to do it, and I don't think they actually did do it. I think what they did was just provided an opportunity away from life. I think if they took the same
Mm-hmm.
people, say like Jet2 took 8 people, sent them off to a hotel for 2 weeks, they'd get exactly the same results, because everyone's just there and
Do you
thinking,
think so?
well, I've got time to actually trying to get to know someone and give something a go. It's not until you haven't got time. And I think your time becomes so precious that, like you said, if your morals don't align with someone, you just think, I've not got the time in my
Mm-hmm.
life to deal with this at this stage of my life anymore. And that works both
Yeah.
ways. This is not, like I said, it's not from just my perspective. I think that's from everyone's perspective that was involved with these.
Yeah. I mean, I thought of it completely differently, but I wonder whether if you were slung, yeah, it's like being put on a desert island with 8 people for a while. Would you end up making connections? Probably. I think there's an element to it. I think there was a certain amount of, okay, these people might like these people. There was a certain element of pairing. What I liked, the fact of getting to spend time with people, because I don't get to spend that much time in male energy. Obviously, I've got my 2 boys,
Yeah.
but around people, because the dating apps, I've just gone back on Hinge, and it's horrendous. It's
Right.
horrendous. I just
Tell me,
can't.
tell me about this. Tell me.
I just find it so exhausting and draining. It like just having
So
to swipe through people. You get very little
was it a very
information.
sorry? Was it a very different now that like you say like people might have recognised you more than they would have done before? Was it a very different response when you went back on there?
I don't know, because I only go on for 5 minutes a day, and I've got a lot of likes. I haven't had anyone say, "Oh, I recognise
Oh,
you
okay.
from." So I'm not finding it very, very different. I don't know whether. I mean, the majority of people that watch that show would have been women anyway. So
Yeah.
it's, the likelihood that many of the men on there have watched the show and recognised me from it is very slim. So it hasn't felt like a very different landscape. And I find it hard to find people I'm attracted to, because like I said, I can find someone aesthetically pleasing, but what I'm attracted to is how I am in that person's presence, whether they've got banter, whether there's, there's just something when you're face to face with someone that you can tell whether there's an attraction. So I find that very hard to find. Oh,
It's a
off
bit
a
of a dong
set
there,
of
wasn't it?
pictures. I know. So I find that very, hard to navigate, and
So,
and and
so
then you engage in conversations, and people then engage and then just disappear, and I just
disappear.
don't.
Well, I had this conversation the other day with someone actually, another pod that I did, and we had different views on that. Let's say about how that is handled, but going back to you sort of just being on Hinge quickly, I want to know, what were the profile pictures? Please tell me there wasn't a picture of you doing a headstand.
No, no, why?
That seems to be a common theme. I haven't done Hinge
That
for
is it.
2 or 3
What,
years,
the
but every time I went on there, there
the
was
yoga headstand?
someone was doing a yoga headstand or a picture with a
No,
horse. They were 2 top
no,
pictures. One girl had combined both
no.
of them doing a headstand with a horse, which was remarkable. So with that,
Wow.
what were
No, I
your
definitely
profile
don't.
pics?
One's of me just sitting on a egg swing and I'm laughing. Another one, like slightly like me going out for a night, a photo from me going out from a night. One's a couple of natural ones and a couple of pose ones, because we all know I'm a bit of a poser. We all know I love the camera. So some posy ones, but just I tried to get a bit of natural, but there's no, with the men, what you find most common is there's either a top off one, a gym
Gym selfie.
photo,
Gym selfie.
gym selfie, one with a beer, or a dog.
Yeah.
Paddleboards keep
I
on
was always
coming up
told
quite
fish.
often.
I was always told men with fish. There's a lot of men with fish on there for some reason, holding a fish. Like, this is the
Oh, they
active
don't
side of
tend to
me.
come up on my. They don't come up on my feed.
No,
So,
that's why the gym selfies keep coming up on your feed. That's what's more to do with. Anyway, moving on. So, what I wanted to talk about today, the main body of the pod, was we've both got boys of a similar age, and just different things that you've dealt with, and the same things that I've dealt with, but how male and female parents, single parents, might deal with them differently. So, going through that early stages of, I'm going to do very male things though, because I'm interested to know. Okay. So, when Khalil, sports wise, was he involved in football, rugby, and all those things?
Yeah.
And how did you find all of that?
From day dot. So he used to be into WWE wrestling, so we had to go to some wrestling matches. He had even the action figures and the wrestling ring, but I had to full on. I've got 2 boys. I had to do WWE wrestling in my front room. like I'd have to do the proper rough and tumble. I'd have to do the kicking the football at the park because it's just been me most of the time. Yeah, I've spent actually, my youngest is just about to finish. He's decided to stop football. He's 16 and a half. And so I worked out that I've been at the side of a football pitch since Khalil was 4 and he's now 21. So I've spent probably more hours of my life at a football pitch than I have doing anything else. So yeah.
So with that's why I brought that up, and it wasn't in terms before anyone hounds me on it in terms of, well, women can do football, and it wasn't because of that, because I know this, do a lot of work with football. It's one of my passions, and the reason that I asked was because when I had Zach coming through, I always did that male thing with him, and I like you do. You end up running a lot of the teams anyway, because if you've been involved in football, you'll end up doing it with the other parents. And then after the games, I'd be interested to know what happened, because what happens with a lot of men is they get into the car with their kids after the game, and you've watched them for the game, and you go, so I want you, and you're thinking to yourself on the way to the car, you're thinking, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to talk about the game today. Just not going to say anything at all. And within 30 seconds of driving out of the car park, you sort of go, so how did you think that went today? And they go, oh, yeah, I think I did really well. Do you? Is that what you... And then you go into this barrage. I just wondered if it was the same. Did you do that as well?
Yeah. So, yeah. And obviously not with the same, like, I don't have the same knowledge as football as the average man who's into football. Like, I'm not an avid football watcher. I don't understand. It took me years to understand the offside rule, and then I forgot it about 20 times over. And then it finally sunk in. But I know when my kid is playing well and when my kid could have done better, right? And I see where they missed opportunities, or that they should have been covering this or sticking to their position. So I was definitely able to see all of that. So I probably wouldn't have gone as hard, because I've watched some dads go so hammer and tong at their kids. It's unreal, because they get so deeply passionate. Obviously, I'm not passionate about football in that way, but I am about them doing their best and showing up and applying themselves in whatever they do. So yeah, there was definitely, with both of the boys, I've definitely had conversations that have led to near-on arguments in the car on the way from football. So, yeah.
I haven't been overly, but they're not some of my best parenting moments. And it wasn't where I was shouting at him, but for some reason I just couldn't let it go. And because kids, once they finish, they don't care. They're like, well, I'm done with that. I'm on to the next thing. You know, I'm like, no, you need to really look at this. We need to do this and this to get that better. But so moving on from that, then with girls, how have you handled that, approached that, and navigated your way through girls with your boys?
Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, I'm still in the process of it. I've got a 16-year-old, right? So, but Khalil's been in a relationship for 4 years nearly. In July, that would be 4 years. So, I think that's been a bit of a saving grace in some ways. But yeah, I've had to have, because no dads are about, like, I've had to had those conversations, those hard conversations about sex, protecting yourself. I've even going on holiday with my youngest one and his mate to Tenerife next month. Right, I've had a conversation with both of them about you can be accused of rape, about girls saying that they're on the pill. Yeah, I go in hard. I'm like, yeah, you need to be.
You do like a deep dive, Nat, don't you?
I do like a deep dive, but they need to be armed with.
Well, the poor kids ain't going to leave the sun lounger. They're going to be just stuck in it. I'm not going out. I'm going to get accused of rape. Never going out again.
No, but just be mindful that you have to make sure you've got consent. Like, as much as I'm making it a joke, like, I really want my boys, and have always wanted my boys, to really understand about respecting women, like not using them for just your own gratification and not caring about their feelings. making sure that everything you do is done respectfully, making sure that you've got complete and utter consent and the other person feels completely comfortable, all of that sort of stuff. And every time I enter into the conversations, they're like, oh, Mum, this is so awkward. Like, I don't want to talk about this with you. I'm like, well, there's no one else here to do it. So we're having this conversation. So yeah, it's been because I'm coming from also a female perspective who's been on the other end of, like some not great behavior, right? And definitely in my teenage years, I, out of my own low self-esteem, I probably didn't have, and I hadn't had those conversations with anyone. So it is so important for me that my boys move through this world. I always said, if you can't find a decent man, I'm sure as hell going to raise two, is that they move through this world with respect for women and how they conduct themselves. So
I completely agree with you in terms of how they treat, and for me, it's how they treat people generally. It's not just in relationships; it's how they treat people generally. But in relationships, I do think as well, though, it's really hard for guys as well now because the dynamics have changed so much. I think which is great, but there's a lot more equality in relationships. So where it used to be sort of like a male tendency, I think women now, or young girls, let's say of that age that they're coming into, they're the one that lead a lot of this stuff still as well. So that's changed as well. Do you not find that with women?
It is. The landscape is so different. But I think that there's some still deep underlying morals that for me, even though the landscape is changing, that I want them to hold firm with, that like old school morals and values that I think are so important, that regardless of how the landscape is changing, that you don't lose that. Yeah, it is hard because you look back in the day, or even older school people, it's like when you go out for dates, it's the man pays, all of that. That's old school values. And now the younger generation, that's completely different.
I'm
landscape.
not sure. Well, from when I speak this out, I don't think that's. It's funny. I had this conversation with one of the young guys at the gym the other day, and he was saying exactly that. And he was sort of saying that the expectation still seems to be there. That first date, guy's paying, and he said like he's got to the stage of where he stopped dating because it's become too expensive. He said because and if you don't, you're definitely still judged for it. He said that he said if you don't pay, you are still by the girl, the woman, whoever it may be, you are still judged for that you haven't done this or you haven't done that. And he said, and you're aware of that, so you're constant. Like there is still that pressure on guys. I think that they need to be like the breadwinner. And as much as sort of like we have moved on in some ways, those old values are still underlying in a lot of places as well, which then becomes a conflicting to sort of modern day values where we should all be equal, we should all contribute, we should all give what you can to the relationship in any form or way that should be. It shouldn't be like one of you is just doing all the legwork and the other one has got different jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so hard to navigate, isn't it? Because I think that there is a clear difference between men and women. And let's say your stereotypical relationship, if it works out and it works out well and you go on to have kids, like the woman is more of the nurturer, the homemaker on a whole. I'm not saying, because there are some families that do it different and the man stays at home and does that stuff and the woman goes out and provides. She might be a higher earner, but on a whole, and even when relationships separate, on a whole, I know situations are very different and some men end up with the lion's share of looking after the kids, but on the whole, statistically, women end up doing the lion's share of raising the kids, like running the home and everything that goes with that. So I think if you look at things from that term, then men being the provider while a woman is at home to a certain extent nurturing and looking after the children, when she's ready to go back to work, then that starts to, okay, we're both doing the equal share again. But there are periods in time where that man is the provider. So I think it's more about the energy of that.
Yeah.
A woman feeling so. I mean, I know younger generations, there's a level of entitlement. Oh, he needs to pay, and he needs to, and they have high expectations. But there is something to be said about when a man comes with that energy, it can enable a woman to feel, and not a woman that expects to have everything bought for them, but it can enable a woman to feel safe in that energy, that okay, he's a man that's got me, he's a man that like has that, I want to take care of you, I want to look after you. That can lead a woman to feel safe in that. So yeah, it's hard navigating, even us at our age, it's hard navigating the landscape of dating, let alone their
Yeah.
age.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. And I think sort of, I don't know about you with Khalil and I know with Zach, I watch sort of from the outside, and I don't think I'd want to be their age now. You know, I'd love to be back at that age, but I don't think the way that things are now, I think it's so much harder. You've got to be such a stronger
Yes.
character, you know, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. They're bombarded with so much more. Even our adult brains, with all of the knowledge that we have, how society is now feels too much sometimes, and navigating it all feels too much. We are constantly bombarded with social media in terms of our body image, how we should be, what a man or woman should be like, constant contradictions as well. There's just so many complexities. I wouldn't even want to go back to that age either. I don't know why you would want to. I don't want to do this all
Do you know
again.
what? If I put a post out the other day because I saw something on I think I was on TikTok, and I saw something on TikTok where this guy was saying that a lot of men now apparently are suffering with a midlife crisis in their middle 30s. And I was like, dudes, if you're suffering in midlife, like, if I could go back to any age, mine would be 35, 36. I just thought that was a great age of where you sort of grow into yourself. You've got confidence. You know what you like, what you don't like. You're self-assured. I just thought that was a great age. If I could go back to 20, I'm thinking if you're having a midlife crisis in your like mid-30s, like you need to stop and realise that you're at the best time in your life going forward now. That's when it starts to get interesting. Because for me, I found 20s, like especially early 20s, really messy. I was still growing into my body. I had arms and legs everywhere. I had acne. It wasn't a good time. It wasn't something I really enjoyed.
Yeah, well, I was already a parent at 23. I mean, I was at 21. I think, entering prison just about, so it wasn't a great time in my life either, to be fair. And then I came out and was pregnant the day I came out of prison. So I went straight into parenthood. And so they were tough years and unhealthy relationships. It's when I left my last relationship, which was the later stages of 30, like that, where I really started to discover who I was and know who I am. Like that was, a really, really great time. I'd love to go back and be a little bit younger with all the knowledge and wisdom I have now. That's what I'd like to do.
I don't know, because some of the best times I had were making the worst mistakes as well.
Well, yeah.
Like some of the worst times I look back on now, and I do find sort of quite amusing. And I sort of do chuckle to myself sometimes as I can't believe I did that. And like, I can't. How did I end up in that situation? So it's always bad. Listen, now I'm gonna cut us off. But what I'd like to do, I think I love talking to you, and I think like if we could delve into relationships a lot more, because I think we're very similar but completely different, and I think we'll have some interesting arguments actually. So
I think we would.
I'd love to have you back in a few weeks or so if you'd love to come back. But it's been great having you on. Thank you for watching 50 Shades of Grey. Please follow the show. You can also follow Natalie. Natalie does a lot of work. Nat, tell everyone quickly about what you do as well that wouldn't know.
I am a self-esteem and relationship recovery coach. So I do one-to-one coaching for women recovering from unhealthy relationships and low self-esteem or trauma. I also run retreats for women in that space as well. I'm in the process of creating a group coaching program. So yeah, I do a lot in that space.
So check Natalie out. She's fantastic. And guys, if you want to check Natalie out, apparently she's on Hinge at the moment. So there you go. Start hitting her up on Hinge. But thank you for joining us. Subscribe below. And Natalie, thank you again. And we'll catch up soon. Take care, guys. Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Stay there, darling, because it just quickly while I need to stop it and it will load.